It raised a few eyebrows when Georgia debuted at number 3 in last week's college football playoff rankings, the initial ones. After knocking off previous number 1 Tennessee, it appears Georgia has shown the college football playoff committee what it's made of, and now it's the Bulldogs at number 1. Hey everybody, this is Sarah Spencer with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and this is Know Your Dogs. To help me preview Georgia's upcoming game against Mississippi State, I'll be joined by Georgia coach Kirby, linebacker Smile Munden, and my coworker, our Georgia beat writer Chip Towers. So stay with us. You might think that knocking off a number 1 team and launching to number 1 yourself is a big deal. To many teams, it probably is. To Georgia, at this point, it just feels normal. And other than ESPN playing inside some of the facilities, there's just not that much excitement, linebacker Smile Munden said.
I mean, I think they got ESPN on some of the TVs, but as far as like being excited about it, not really, because whoever's number 1 in November, it don't really too much matter. Like by the time the end of the year is over with, so we just gotta not really worry about a ranking and keep doing what we've been doing.
Mississippi State quarterback Will Rogers leads the SEC in total passing yards with 2,912 and total passing touchdowns with 26. He averages just under 49 attempts per game. He also put up 336 passing yards against Georgia when he was a freshman in 2020. That was the COVID year when Georgia edged Mississippi State 31-24. Georgia coach Kirby was quick to point out that this go around, Georgia will be facing a much more experienced Will Rogers.
Well, a lot more experienced quarterback. You know, that was the kickoff for him. And he played really well in that game and kind of got a lot of confidence, playing against us. And he's I don't know how many games he's played since then, but a lot. He's broken a lot of records. He's very intelligent. He doesn't make mistakes. He uses Coach Leach's offense to his strength. And they understand, very similar to last week, triple options. They know who they are. They have answers for what they do. They're usually one step ahead of their answers than you are because you don't play against it but once a year, and they do it all the time. So they have exposure to everything every defense has tried on them, and their quarterback's very experienced, and that's the biggest difference. Defensively, they may not be the same players they were because a lot of those guys are gone. They are extremely physical, disruptive. Defensive coordinator does a great job. Ryon Horne does a great job with it.
Bearing all that in mind, Kirby did point out that Mississippi State is emphasizing the run more this year, even if that's not really something you think of when you think of Mike Leach and his air raid offense days at Texas Tech. Now, Mississippi State is still last in the SEC in rushing yards per game at 80.67, but they do have 2 guys who are in the top 25 rushers in the SEC, and that's Dylan Johnson and Jaquavius Marks.
It's not just the passing with them. You got to stop the run, and they're usually right, meaning if you don't have enough in the box, they're running. If you got too many in the box, they're throwing, and that's a favorable box for them. So, and then the passes aren't like he drops back there and holds the ball for a long time. He gets the ball out pretty quick, which is tough to get sacks on.
All right, everybody, let's bring in our Georgia beat writer, Chip Towers. Chip, Georgia's coming off a big win against then number 1 Tennessee. How important is it to not kind of fall into a trap or a letdown this week, especially on the road?
Yeah, who knew that Tennessee was going to be like it was? I mean, at the beginning of the year, they were picked to finish 3rd or 4th in the SEC, East, depending on who you were looking at. So you never knew this game was going to be what it ended up being here Saturday, which was something incredible. But even then, going way back to the summer, I have an SEC schedule I keep, and way back when I wrote in green ink for some reason, trap game on going to Starkville and play Mississippi State because it falls in between Tennessee and Kentucky, 2 SEC East traditional rivals. You knew they'd be meaningful no matter what, with where Georgia was expected to be. And so I always thought this was going to be a difficult game, and it's going to be. It falls in a tough place for Georgia. They can't be thinking about the Tennessee game. They can't be looking ahead to Kentucky. You better be fully focused on those Mississippi State Bulldogs.
Now, defensively, Jalen Carter is a guy I wanted to touch on. Before we look to Mississippi State, he did so well against Tennessee, and I think is a big reason why Georgia won the way it did. And also Robert Beal is someone people are probably pretty curious about. He got injured in that game against Tennessee. He was out with a stinger. Kirby Smart says it looks like he'll be good to go, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, he says Kirby always says he could have gone back in, right? It seems like, and stingers are kind of complicated. We're talking about Robert Beal, the outside linebacker, who's having to replace Nolan Smith. And he goes out just 40 seconds into the second half, and that was a tough injury for Georgia. Now, they held their own with Chaz Chambliss and Marvin Jones Jr., but suffice it to say they'd rather have Robert Beal in there. But that's a tricky injury, the stinger. I mean, it involves the nerves coming from your neck and spine into your shoulder, and so you can't be too careful with it. But I would imagine he's going to be able to go. I'm sure he'll travel to Starkville, and either way, as you alluded to, Jalen Carter's definitely going to be on this trip. And listen, guys, Jalen Carter is a difference maker. Now, I know everybody knows that, but going back and looking at that,
he's finally looking like people expected him to look like.
This is what they talked about in the preseason when he was a preseason All-American. And as Kirby's pointed out, he had one snap against Oregon before he was hurt, and he's played injured all year. And the great thing about the Tennessee game was they go so fast, they don't allow you to substitute. He played 48 snaps.
So he had no choice.
He had no choice but to stay on the field, and he played great. We saw him. I mean, he should have been credited with the safety. He wasn't, but he caused 2 fumbles as it was. He had a sack. He could have been credited with another sack. They ruled that the quarterback had gotten back to the line of scrimmage. I mean, dude was wreaking havoc all day long. He's going to Starkville with him, so that's good news.
This is a pass-heavy Mississippi State team. I know Kirby Smart doesn't want anyone to think that's all they do, but that's mostly what they do, and they're good at it. How much of a challenge is it going to be for this Georgia defense and the secondary in particular up against a guy like Will Rogers?
Well, I think it helps that they just had Tennessee. Now, it's different. It's not the same at all. They're not quite the quick tempo thing. And the thing about Mississippi State, they don't really look to hit you with those explosives. They
just chip away.
Paper cut you to death, I mean, little short passes really fast, one after another. And they gave Georgia fits here in 2020. I think Georgia won by 1 score in 2020, and that was with the same quarterback who was a freshman then, Will Rogers. Now he's an experienced guy. They've already played some really good teams. Between that, the noise, a night game.
Cowbells, all the cowbells, more cowbells.
It just seems to me like this is going to be one of those just annoying, agonizing games. But look, Georgia's a much better team, and if they take care of business, take care of the football, they should be able to take care of this opponent.
This is a 6-3 Mississippi State team, but they've only lost to pretty good teams. They've lost to LSU, Alabama, and then a pretty scrappy Kentucky team. The line, it's moving. It was at 17, 16 and a half. How do you feel about that line?
Well, here's what's going on with Georgia now. They're the #1 team in the land. They've made that pronouncement to everyone. And so they're like a flotilla now going wherever they go. It's a big deal. So this is going to be a big deal to the state of Mississippi. This is a big deal to Mike Leach and all those people over there. So, I expect Georgia to catch the best from Mississippi State. The line, quite frankly, they've been pretty accurate most of the year. You and I talked about it. I said, I like Georgia at 8 points. I think they might even win by 2 scores. Now, and I know that game this past Saturday
could have been a lot worse. Georgia could have whooped them in the second half, but they didn't.
Yeah.
They wanted to be cautious.
But I get more of a kind of Missouri feeling on this one. Georgia was infinitely better than Missouri, but you got to have your full focus. Hopefully they will be, and if they do what they're supposed to do, they'll cover that line and then some, I think.
Chip, thank you so much for joining me. Thanks to all of you for watching. Make sure you go to ajc.com or subscribe to our YouTube channel to find more videos just like this one.